Hello everybody, welcome to the inaugural View Stroke Look webinar. As of lunchtime today we had 86 delegates, which was the absolute limit, plus a waiting list. So it's clearly struck a chord with lots of us working around the UK and perhaps beyond. My name's John Milligan. I am representing View today. I'm the team leader of the Virtual School Sensory Support in the east of England, in Norfolk. Look and View have worked together for quite a while, but it all came to a head a bit at the View conference in Birmingham in March this year when we decided we had to do it seriously. So we've been doing that ever since. Look, as I'm sure most of us know, is a small charity supporting VI young people and their families across the UK. View is the vision impairment education workforce, and there's quite a lot of members looking at me from via the screen at the moment. The annual conference, online and face-to-face CPD opportunities and support is probably the three main thrusts of the organisation. In terms of today, Look held an event for parents and carers last week, which really prompted a number of concerns that parents, carers felt they wished to share with the sector. And it looked like a good idea for us to get together to address some of those. So we've got a panel today to look at some of the issues that arose from that discussion, and there will be an opportunity for chat-based discussion as we progress through the next hour and 27 minutes or so. We'll be using the concerns, as I say, but the focus today is really about transition from primary to secondary phases. That's what we'll be focusing on. I'm sure it will extend into other areas, probably including COVID-19. But at the moment, I think I'd just like you to hold that in your thoughts as we have the discussion. If I could now hand over to Ellen from Look.
Thanks, John. So I'm Ellen, and the events coordinator at Look. Thank you all for joining us today. As John said, we held an event on this topic for parents last week, which was really informative, and we had a lot of really good discussion with parents about their top concerns, their main concerns, and what they're worried about around their child moving from year 6 to year 7. So we'll talk about that during the session today, but some of the main concerns that came up for parents were things like emotional well-being and mental health for their children, their social development, and kind of the worry about making new friends and the possibility of bullying, and being able to communicate their child's needs effectively to their teachers. So the recording of that event, and the same for this one today, will be available on the Look website and the Look YouTube channel. We have limited time today, so obviously we'll try and cover as much as we can, but anything we don't get to or don't have time to cover, we'll try and any questions we'll try and address in the notes if we don't have time to address them today. We'll be taking notes from the session, so as we said, the recording and the notes from the session will be available afterwards as well for you to go back and review and share with colleagues and anyone else. So that's it from me. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Ellen. I ask the panel members, as I name you individually, just to give a brief overview of who you are and why you're here. That would be really helpful. So Emma, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, my name's Emma McGibbon. I'm a clinologist at Great Ormond Street Hospital. I've spent time working in the developmental vision clinic there that you might know, and I work with young people and children with Bardet-Biedl syndrome at the hospital. It's very nice to be here. Welcome.
And next member of the panel, Vanessa.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Brown. I'm a counsellor with the charity Hearts Vision Loss, based in Welwyn Garden City. Part of my role as a visually impaired counsellor is to visit schools across Hertford, working with students aged 6 to 18, their friends and family.
Welcome. And next one, Katerina.
Hi, I'm Katerina Walls. I work as a QTVI in Lancashire. I'm a member of View. I'm currently working on a document compiling strategies and advice to help schools think through the practical implications for children and young people with a VI returning to school and transitioning to their next school.
Thank you and welcome. And next is Jane.
So I'm Jane. I'm here as a parent carer. I have, I would say, very incredible child who's severely sight impaired, and profoundly deaf, mainstream, and she's in year 7. So we were kind of negotiating transition, and then we had to stop, and she's at home.
That's great. Thank you for your time, Jane. And final member of the panel is Angela from HAB-VI UK.
Hello, I'm Angela Wood. I'm qualified habilitation specialist. I work in Dorset, Bournemouth Pool and Christchurch, and I'm also chair of Habilitation VI. So I've been invited along here to talk to you and hopefully give some advice and support regarding habilitation and mobility as part of the child's transition.
Thank you, Angela, and welcome. Okay, everybody, I think there will be Trudeau-like pregnant pauses periodically, for those of you who saw the video yesterday. What we have done is extract 4 questions from the parent-carer meeting that was last week. So first of all, I'd like Jane and Vanessa to get the conversation rolling to consider this question of parents, carers going through the transition process to high/secondary school.
Starting year 7 can be exciting but also anxious time for both parents and students. It's really common but doesn't make it any less stressful. Preparation is a key in dealing with situations where there's a lot of unknowns. You would like the school to understand your child's needs. You would like them to access the support that's needed. A safe environment helps them to understand that they're not alone, and helps adjustment and confusion that they're going through.
Thanks, Vanessa. Jane, with your personal experience of your daughter?
So this is my experience, but also based on what parents told us last week. So primary schools can be a place where the child feels safe and accepted. As parents, we only have to negotiate with one team, support staff and Senko. The change feels very daunting for us. Home is often the place where our children melt down and have the added pressure of teaching them life skills and independence in a way parent carers of sighted children don't have to. Our fears are huge for our children, and letting them go and trusting that other people can support them and help them thrive can be very difficult. We long for them to be independent, but it's a very big thing to negotiate. We need to prepare for the change, understand the new routines, be confident that handover is being well managed and that our children won't be overwhelmed by the new school. Silence and not being included in the conversation is the most difficult thing to manage. We want to be confident for our child and support them to manage the change, but we need to know what the plans are. The social side of school life and the fear of bullying and isolation are often our biggest concerns, with no easy answers. We want our children to be happy and feel accepted more than getting good grades, though their potential is also important. And I think I know that you must see lots of anxious parents, but the way to reduce the anxiety is to include us in all the conversations we're having and make sure we're alongside you. And that installs confidence in our children. And I have to say, Chloe's transition went really well at the start. It was later on that things started unraveling. So, yeah.
Okay, that's great. I'm sure we'll explore some of these issues further as the afternoon progresses. Question number 2 from last week was, how do we address the emotional needs and the well-being of children and young people going through this transition process, particularly at this time? Emma and again Vanessa, could I ask you to consider those?
It's important to include students when going to look around the school, but not only to include them, to sit down with the teacher and to let your student, your child be heard, listen to, but also let your child know that they've been heard. Let the school listen to their concerns. Write down the questions that you want before you go so you don't forget any. It's important, as I emphasise, that your child is heard. Some parents are over concerned or are concerned, and that can rub off to your student. You don't want that to happen. Try and control your anxiety while your children are around. Give your child extra time to have a look around. Go to the school as much as possible. As I say, ask them questions. It's important that they've got so much anxiety, but they meet other parents, they meet other students, and you do the same.
Emma?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this quite a lot. So do stop me if I'm talking too much, John. But I suppose just to start by saying that you know your child, you know your young person very well. So really put yourself in their shoes to predict what their needs might be in the secondary setting, and do discuss with them about any worries that they have, and encourage them to be open about this. Don't be afraid to ask them, because if they have worries, not asking won't make them not be there. So I would encourage you to be as open as you can with them. It's also really helpful to focus on the things that you can control, and try not worry too much about the things that you can't control. So we don't know when children are going to go back. We don't have any dates. Ruminating on that might make you feel a bit hopeless or more anxious. So really focusing on what you can do will be really helpful. Thinking about how your child might show that they are feeling anxious might be things like changes in their eating, in their sleeping, changes in how they're behaving. And really providing that reassurance as parents will be very, very key. Letting them know that you have confidence that things will be okay when they're in secondary school, that your teachers, are working hard to make sure that everything is ready for them as much as you can at the moment. Really calm and your voice is reassuring. Children do feel better when they think that their parent is and other people are in control of the situation. I suppose, like has been said before, making sure that your young person feels included from the beginning. So proactively putting in place that social and emotional support at the beginning, getting that support in place at the start, and whether that's having an adult at the school, a mentor who they can trust, who they can get to know, to really prompt them about how different areas are going. So asking, getting them to ask about how friendships are developing, that do become more complicated in secondary school. They might benefit from discussing different scenarios within friendships, prompting them to speak about any worries that they have. Buddy systems can be really helpful to make sure that somebody feels included, identifying people that can be in that role, and making sure that unstructured times, such as break times before, after school, that plans are in place for those, and clubs and activities are accessible right from the start. I suppose finally, just making sure that mentor or that a tutor is really prompting about schoolwork, checking early and checking frequently that things are working well, that need to be made, that they are, changes are put into place early.
Thank you both. That's really helpful, giving that sort of global picture of the young person moving into a new environment, not just focusing on their vision or their vision impairment. The third question, and we are getting there, so this is aimed at Katerina and Angela, more practical in a sense. What sort of mobility families expect for their children and young people while social distancing, as we've seen over the last few weeks, starting to open up again? So perhaps Angela, could you pick that one up first?
So Habilitation VI UK has published now, and that is published on the front page of our website. All professionals can go on there and have a look at the guidance. It's there to be part of and inform you to be part of your own risk assessment that you will be putting together for each of the children that you're working with. And it really homes in on some very specific, and it's based on the Chief sort of Medical Officer's advice about COVID, because not only have we got, young people moving from primary to secondary with all the normal anxieties that they have at any given year, but we've also got COVID as well to consider. So we've put lots of strategies in there for habilitation and mobility specialists to integrate assessments. Now, these risk assessments are there as part of that wider transition document that you will be all putting together, and that's your communication document, isn't it, between the schools, the sensory services and all those professionals within those two areas, and essentially with the family and with the student themselves. And I totally echo what Emma and Jane have said about ensuring that the child communication, so that they know what the expectations are as well, because with the COVID, it's going to be very much about this real partnership between everybody, and everybody talking to each other at any time and having access to be able to contact each other. And that's very important, I think, for especially for, you know, habilitation specialists, where we're looking at organising environmental access audits. We've got to think about getting to the new setting and thinking about doing some route familiarisation and how that's going to look. What the responsibilities of everybody are, including the habilitation specialist and the young person. And there's a lot around hand hygiene and how we're going to work. You know, how is that going to work? How are we going to be able to wash our hands? Have we got sanitizer? You know, what do we need to do? And we've got to make sure that, you know, each and every student understands what those new guidelines are, what those procedures are, and we need to be checking their understanding as well. There's been lots and lots of discussions around social distancing. You know, does the student understand what 2 meters is? You know, how do they gauge that distance? What if that's not possible? What if we do have to sighted guide? And we will have to do that, but what are the safety measures that we need to put in place to ensure that, you know, everybody feels confident, they're going to feel safe? So there's lots of communication that needs to take place. The transition document is very, very important, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions that hopefully I'll be able to answer later on, if you want, you know, more on the specific strategies. Katerina?
So when I was thinking about the question, I was thinking in addition to what Angela said, about we really need to encourage the young person to have opportunities to be independent. And when we do the environmental audit, we can already do that, either the HAP specialist or audits. We need to talk to schools about, are they, for instance, using just one classroom per class rather than changing classrooms in this situation now? And then if they're just using one classroom, which one is it? Can we have an influence in which one is the best one to use? Because it's close to the SEND base, for instance, or close to other places where the student needs to go. Can maybe different areas of the school be introduced gradually to the students so they are confident in one area to be independent before it's also really important, I think, to think about the classroom the student will be using in relation to where things are stored. So there's equipment to be stored, there are books to be stored, there's paper to be stored. Where is that? If one classroom is used again, can we have storage system in that classroom, which is usually not what we do maybe in a secondary school, but it is all a new situation at this time. I think we need to think about one-way systems in corridors. A lot of schools, if they don't, will introduce one. If the child is if the child is right-handed, could we have a right-handed system to walk around so they can trail with a symbol cane on the right hand or on the right side? And then I think what is really important is that we plan, they can guide the student around so other professionals can have the social distancing measures. And then after a visit, I would ask for a plan, a floor plan of the school. Sessions with the children, if we do online sessions with them, or the parents can go through that plan again and again, talk them through it. Maybe if the child has sight, color it in different areas so they build that mental map before they go again, because we might have less visits Usually we do splits after each other, but we can help, I think, by giving them a plan to have that mental map.
That's brilliant. Thank you. The final question, some of you will be pleased to hear, and this is very specific around what do we feel are issues around implementing the guidance that is contained within an education, health and care plan in the new setting, given that staff can't get together for training, etc., etc. Angela.
Whatever we do, we take our time and we plan what we're going to do. We want a very positive transition, and it might take a little bit longer to achieve what we want to achieve. But as we work through the transition plan, it needs to be positive steps every way through it. So if it takes longer, then that's what that's what has to happen. I think it's important to take it one step at a time and be very clear. Some of the areas in the education healthcare plan may not be covered as quickly as others. When schools are having to consider putting Braille or meaningful symbols on walls or floors, this may take some time to achieve. But it's essential that the children, all students are going to be encouraged to go back to school. And we want to make sure that all of our children with SEN, they are going to be welcomed, but they may all go back at different times, because for some children, it may take a little bit longer for schools and sensory services to put in place the necessary steps to ensure that all children with SEN will be able to go back and have a positive transition. So I think that's just important to note to begin with. Again, I think we are going to have to plan the training for teaching staff. Historically, traditionally, we always have sort of training days, inset days, and I think that will probably have to either be in very small groups where we can social distance, or we'll have to have virtual meetings, which is, it takes some creativity to do that. For habilitation specialists, many are planning to go into schools and to carry out the environmental access audits. And whilst we're in schools, we are doing some advisory sort of work in terms of how to support the young person with sighted guide, and we can demonstrate that at a distance. Again, within the Habilitation VI UK guidance, we're not saying that we won't be sighted guiding, because there will be times but we've put into place the strategies to maintain sort of hand hygiene. So things, just for an example, with sighted guide, if we aren't able to verbally direct the student, or they found that it's too difficult in specific areas to trail using a symbol cane, then we will be encouraging staff to sighted guide. But alongside that, we would be looking at how they sighted guide. So the tech. Now, part of the government guidelines is to say that if you're going to sneeze and you haven't got a tissue, you use your elbow area on your sleeve. Now, that is the key point at which a lot of people sighted guide. So we're going to have to modify that. And we've put some strategies in the guidance as to how you do that. So there are alternatives that we can look at, the slight modifications, alternative to make sure that those strategies are clear, they're transparent, and that they're consistent for all the staff, so that it avoids any confusion, and hopefully raise a little bit of confidence in what we're doing if everybody's doing the same thing.
I think habilitation is habilitation and orientation and mobility is one of the two areas which is most where we have to think really creatively, and where we maybe worry how can we implement that. And the other area, I think, is the one-to-one support. Some of our children can be helped schools to implement that support with the social distancing rules. Some services have got their own teaching assistants, so they can have a continuity of support, which is ideal. Other services don't have that. I think in some schools, we have support assistance which goes to a secondary school, maybe the ideal scenario if people get on with each other. But even if we have new staff which take on that support, planning and preparation is key for that transition. Planning with a new setting, which 1 or 2 assistants will work with a young person, and then working with that person or with those 2 people to getting them used to the technology, to modification of resources, how and whom to liaise with, if there are technicians in your services who do the modification. So all this needs to be planned quite well in advance, so people feel, the support assistants and families and the young person feel enabled and empowered when they go back. I think, like Angela said, staff training is crucial, and we have how to do that in small groups or online. But I think additionally to the normal training we do to sensitize people to visual impairment, we have to make sure, I feel, teachers know that things might take longer. If we don't want to have the support assistant next to our students all the time, which we can't because of social distancing, we have to make sure teachers wait more, which they don't often do in secondary schools. It's a fast pace, but teachers have to understand that if a student takes their equipment themselves or switches between equipments, so staff training is really important. We also need to think about very practical things, as support won't be able to socially distance all the time. We need to think about where are wipes and hand gel to be stored so that they are handy all the time. If a child's computer just crashes or something is not quite right, the support assistant needs to be going there. So we need to wipe surfaces. So we have to have some kind of system which is handy, and we have to have tissues, and I think, and thought through in advance who is responsible for what. And just finally, while we need to encourage independence, I think it is also really important to reassure the student that support is available, and that with the right precautions like wiping equipment or wearing a mask, they can have help. And I think that's important to have that reassurance for students so that they don't feel overwhelmed by this, I have to now do everything on my own.
It is now time to effectively open the floor to the discussion. A couple of things have already come in, he says, in the best Eurovision style. One of the points that's been made is the importance of the QTVI and the HAB team being advocates for the child and the young person as well, so that actually the family feel that they have a team alongside them, and that there is a constant in this very sort of fluid environment that we're in at the moment. Emma, I wonder if I could ask you to comment in the young person's life, and for that, and maybe Vanessa talk about the family perspective after Emma.
Yeah, so I guess I was saying before about how important it will be for young people to have somebody with whom they've got a good relationship with at the schools, so that if things do crop up for them, that they're identified early on, that they have somebody that they feel that they can speak to. Children become young adults, they will want to gain that independence from parents, and the skill of self-advocacy and those independence skills are a key part of that. And so as parents moving from the primary to the secondary setting, I think can feel a bit more distant and a bit more worried about that, but really encouraging those those positive relationships at school with staff, whether that's pastoral support or another member of staff, so that their worries can be addressed and any issues that are coming up for them. I think similarly, I know that bullying was mentioned before, and again, having a trusted adult that a young person has at school will hopefully be quite protective for them in terms of them already knowing how the young person is interacting with their peers, negotiating with them in a trusted way, situations, how to manage a bullying situation or a situation where a disagreement within friendship groups. Secondary schools are very familiar with those types of scenarios. And so, yes, having that from as early as possible, really, is really important.
That's great. Thank you, Emma. Vanessa, before you start your answer around maybe the parental perspective, Jane, could I ask that after Vanessa, you talk about your personal experience with your daughter when Vanessa has answered the question?
Okay. From the parental point of view, and schools, like Emma says, to keep that communication up with school as much as possible. Encourage your child with the friendship group. They can have friends home if possible. How would they go to school? Can they get to school? Can they have a friend? Encourage friendships. Encourage your child to walk to school if possible with another child, with a friend that they've made. But they try and build a friendship outside school as well. It is a worrying time from parents, and it is hard to let them go. It's at that age where they're just moving on from holding parents' hand to having that their own self-esteem, to build on that, and to encourage that independence as much as you can. And letting go is going to be hard, but to be in communication with the school as much as you can, which is important, and to have meetings with the school to see how your child is getting on. Have any concerns? Again, speak to the school. Listen to your child. Listen to if there's any comments about bullying, or you think there might be something, or your child, you notice different behaviour in your child, and do speak to the school. It is communication that is going to be vital here, but not with too many questions for your child. Try and make it as gentle as possible.
So having just gone through this, I had clear, very good, and I still do, relationships with the QVTI and our habilitation, and I tried really hard to establish relationship with the school. It was no one's fault, but the Senko changed over the summer, and I agree. I think everything in terms of my fears got a lot easier once she'd realised that there was going to be teething problems. There was a lot that we had to negotiate and think about, and so, you know, I could feel myself relaxing the moment at the end of the kind of winter, the first term, where she said, oh yes, we'll meet 6 weeks, and we needed that because it's a big team and there was lots of things. And like I said, I think Chloe went in wanting the independence, feeling like she got this, didn't want her support anymore, but it caused her problems because actually you know, because of her deafness as well, social relationships are even trickier, and in some ways provision was dropped without my kind of input, because I think that's the thing, we do know our children the best, and she started displaying, she was really angry and she wouldn't about it, and she wanted to be the same as everyone else, but was up against loads of things. I wish in retrospect we'd had a real clear mentor for her from the school, because she didn't want to talk to her one-to-ones, that's fair enough. She didn't want to talk to me, that's fair enough. She's trying to be who she is. But if the pastoral support had been identified, I think much earlier, it would have made a real difference. She needed someone from the new school for her. And the tutor had lots of quite disruptive in her group, and there were just reasons why it was getting quite tricky. But and I think what I did when she stopped being able to talk was I set up some squishies, which she loves. So when she'd had a bad day, she'd come home and put a lemon squishy in her pot. And I was like, okay, she can't talk about it, but I know things are tough. And then if she'd had a good day, which we could celebrate, she put a big cake squishy in. But I think things like that, knowing that actually it's a big change, so that your child might not and the children you support might not know how to express it, but kind of knowing that there's a chance to catch it and negotiate, people to still meet. And I think, as we've all learned, meeting remotely is still possible. So meetings now with the family and with everyone else involved will be really key.
Thank you, Jane. Moving on, we've had a comment around a product called Ramble Tag. I'm tempted to check that you're all awake to say, put your hands up digitally if you have heard of or used a ramble tag. It was discussed at a couple of webinars that I was involved with last week. Rehabilitation officer colleague has commented that something like this could be used to reduce, minimize the risk of contact between the child or young person with vision impairment and different staff around settings. Okay, anybody?
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, it's certainly, it's a product that people may have used. The thing around using anything on your body, you've got to put it on. That means you've got to touch it. So there's not really much difference between that and putting on your coat, your jacket, your cardigan, your jumper. It's a touch contact point. So I think it's a bit like the face masks. You know, they're not going to protect you against COVID. And the ramble tag won't either, because you've got to touch it, you've got to put it on, you've got to take it off. You've also got to make sure that you wash it regularly, because it's a contact point. So you can just save your money and wash your clothes each day. You know, take a spare cardigan, spare jumper. Also think about how many students you're going to be working with. We know that the government advice is saying, you know, for class teachers to remain teaching one class of students, to reduce the number of teachers, you know, teaching any group at any time. And it will be the same with sighted guiding and teaching our students. We have to think about how many we're going to be teaching, how many we're going to be sighted guiding in any given day, and the plans that you need to put into place. You know, the government advice is hand hygiene works so much better than anything else. So we know that COVID stays on clothing. We know by washing hands, using hand hygiene, think about how you're going to sighted guide, think about other alternatives such as trailing techniques, verbalizing instructions, keeping, you know, don't sort of stand face to face with the student, stand to the side of the student. Reduce the amount of time that you're going to be guiding and working with a student at any given time. And think about, you know, if you can, get out and inside, get some fresh air, some ventilation. I think those strategies are probably going to work better than trying to introduce something else that doesn't actually make the problem any more difficult or easier, because with face masks, you've got to touch your face to put the face mask on. So that means that you've got to wash your face at the contact point when you take the mask off. So if you hadn't put the mask on in the first place, you wouldn't have to wash your face. So sometimes it's kind of trying to solve a problem that actually isn't going to, because you're creating a problem by just introducing something else that's unnecessary. So that's not in our Habilitation VI UK guidance, because you're creating another problem by trying to solve a problem, if you see what I mean.
I think we all do. Thanks, Angela. Emma, I just wonder whether this is an opportunity to maybe talk about the impact of wider anxiety. Certainly in Norfolk, we're starting to get calls from parents asking what is our advice on their vision impaired child going back into schools, early years setting, etc. I just wonder whether there's a way of sort of managing parental anxieties. If you could solve that problem in about the next 30 seconds, that would be brilliant.
Sure, no problem. I have my magic wands in my bag. I guess just to say, first of all, that anxiety isn't a bad thing that we need to get rid of. Anxiety is very, very useful. It's very adaptive. It's how, you know, we've survived for so many years. It really helps us to focus on the problems that we need to fix when we are stressed. You know, we use our brains kind of want us to be able to predict, think about the worst case scenarios so we can prepare ourselves and protect ourselves as well. So as long as, you know, there are situations that we can problem solve, it's a really useful emotion to have. It's not so great when there isn't a solution to problems. So, you know, just to say it is okay to be anxious, and everyone's feeling more anxious now, you know, with the COVID situation and the uncertainty that goes along with it. I guess for parents, you know, acknowledging your own anxiety is really helpful. And as much as possible, trying to protect our young people from that anxiety. If you do know that you're feeling very anxious and you have strategies that can help you to relax yourself, you know, taking yourself away when you are getting particularly stressed, that could be a really useful thing to do, making sure you're looking after your own mental health, you know, and modelling to young people how you're managing your own emotional needs, whether that's anxiety or something else. I think as well, you know, we can have a lot of very worrying thoughts at the moment, and sometimes your thoughts can end up being quite kind of catastrophic. So it can be helpful just to question your own thoughts that you're having. So, you know, are you really expecting the worst case scenario? Are you being realistic about what your worries are? You know, think kindly towards yourself. If your friend was in the same situation, what might you say to them? And you can also ask those same questions or use those same ideas with your child if they are particularly anxious. I might just draw on something that might be relevant, which is when children and young people ask repetitive questions, or they might be speaking or wanting to speak a lot about, you know, the upcoming transition to secondary school. You know, often when children ask questions repetitively and you're giving an answer, it's not necessarily about getting the information, it's about conveying, I'm very worried and anxious about this. So answering again and again can be quite unhelpful. So instead, it can be useful to have, you know, to answer a question once, maybe twice, and then distract onto something else, a different topic, a different activity. Or saying, we'll speak about the transition once a day at 6 o'clock or at 3 o'clock, and try and limit the amount of time that you're focusing on that anxiety and that worry for your child or young person. But I suppose, you know, as other people have said, this is an exciting time as well, and there's a lot of things to be positive about. So addressing those worries and letting young people know that you are understanding them and you know, helping with those, but also balancing that out with the excitement and all the fun, new, exciting things they're going to be doing and learning at secondary school.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Emma. And I think that idea of anxiety not always being seen as a negative effect is really important, and maybe something we could all take back to some of the families that we're working with. Jane, you've actually sent me a point about parents, carers contacting practitioners and professionals. Would you like to expand on that a little?
Yeah, I think, I mean, and I'm in regular contact with the QBTI, that it is our way of dealing with our own worries and anxieties. I'm so lucky. I've got some brilliant people I can phone or I message and say, this has happened, can we talk about it? And then by the time I finish the conversation, I have solutions. You know I'm part of, and it's really great because then I can go and say to Chloe, this is what we're dealing with today. You know, we're through Look, we're having some really good chats with her mentors. She's been able to talk a bit more about her fears going back to school in year 8, and we're finding solutions. And it's just that such a bonus to have you guys in the background. Yeah, it's really, really helpful. I know a lot of parents who are feeling, like we said at the start, really, really anxious. It is understandable, but you know, them knowing that it's understandable and that they're not alone is so reassuring. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say, really.
That's good, and that's really helpful. Thank you. I think it's also been pointed out to me in the right-hand column of my screen for colleagues to note that Look UK have, in collaboration with York College, set up a service where there can be 6 free sessions of, I guess, telephone or Zoom-based counselling for any parents, carers of vision impaired young people. So that information is all available on the Look website, or if you email Look, they'll be able to give you contact details, etc. So that's a really positive collaboration that I think that's happening in what I would call down south, but York to a lot of people is still the north of England.
Yeah, just to let you know, every fortnight on a Friday evening, I'm also offering parent carers the chance to talk in a Zoom chat about how things are, and Ellen and I were talking about setting one up themed around transition and anxiety, just to continue the conversation. So it's free for people, and it's just parents offering each other support and solutions in this time. So that's all I wanted to say.
I just feel I need to clarify, as a parent, that is for parents of vision impaired children and young people.
Sorry.
It's not just open to anybody who could do with a bit of counselling at the moment. Yeah. Katerina, sorry.
No, it's yeah, I just wanted to add to what Emma said. Sort of, it might be also helpful for the young people and for the families to create a transition booklet together. Our service is just sort of working on one, on modifying one to be used with large print readers. And whereas usually a child during this term would have transition visits, they would have group visits with other children, and they would meet other children, they would meet their tutors. All of this won't be happening, so it might be helpful to create a booklet together where you put pictures. Obviously we can't have the pictures of the other children, but we can have pictures maybe of their tutor or of some key staff they will be meeting, pictures of the classrooms, pictures of the floor plan, picture of the uniform, all the things which can be exciting when you look at them again, and maybe sort of those repetitive questions Emma was talking about can be addressed through that, just to reassure us this is going to happen. And then in that booklet, we can also maybe voice our own questions, looking at concerns. What is actually the worries on a scale from 1 to 10? How big is the worry, and who might be able to help us? If I've forgotten something, what would I do? Just sort of gather questions, also sort of telling about themselves. It's something which they could share with key staff as well. And I think sort of creating something like that could be something very positive with the families during this time now, during this term, but it can then be carried through. And then possibly after the first term can look at it again. What has happened, what has not happened, which concerns were concerns which sort of have been solved, which new concerns have been added. Then after the second term, we look again, because as Jane was saying before, the transition is not just happening in September, it's an ongoing process, and the second term might be worse than the first term because suddenly the reality of I've changed everything has hit us. So yeah, that might be a good idea. As I said, we are working on one at the moment, which we are happy to share. I work on one as well, on a booklet like that.
That's great, Katerina, thank you. Well, I think we all like the phrase, and we're happy to share when people make those contributions. Jane, there's a quick question from the virtual floor for you, which is your Friday night parental chats that exclude me. How can people get in touch with you if they wanted to join that chat?
So through Look, Ellen, as she will advertises it out. So I'm sure she could send the link to everybody who's come today. And it's just ongoing. It's something that I offered at the start because I feel better when I help support others as well. It's part of my coping strategy.
That's brilliant. Thank you. So everybody, Look is your port of call to pass on details to parents. Emma, you wish to make a comment around parental support?
Yes, well, I suppose I just want to reflect on the fact, you know, from my experience that you know, parents who have children with visual needs, you've got a lot of experiences that you can draw on from these situations. I just want to emphasize that you must remember that you have all of those experiences and skills as a result. You know, a lot of people have had to face a lot of challenges and overcome a lot of frustrations, you know, managing worry and uncertainty about children's vision, adapting your routines, your activities to overcome all the barriers that you will have faced, and, you know, recovering from situations and learning from your experiences. So I just wanted to emphasize that a lot of you know all of this, and you have these resources, and so it's important not to forget these skills that you have. You know, as professionals, we can support, but you've also been through a lot, and you know, have a lot. So remember that you have that.
Thanks, Emma. And that is important, I think, that yes, professionals are there to support. That phrase is really important for people to take away. I've just had another bit of information about the parent support group. It is 8 o'clock on a Friday night. Ellen's comment says the support group is available to sing up to. I think she means sign, but if anybody would like to deliver something in the media of song, I'm sure the other members of the group would be delighted. So there's also already people are asking Katerina, how will this transition booklet be shared when it is ready? So no pressure. Let's have a date and a method of sharing.
It could possibly be shared like the guidance. So the guidance I'm working on, it's not something I'm just thinking up. It's sort of, I've looked at the Hub VI UK guidance and the Worcester guidance, and some, I've had a few services send me what they've been thinking about the risk assessment. So at the moment, I'm collating that and putting that into a guidance which will be on the View website. And I wonder whether that's somewhere there where we then can put that transition booklet as well. I would have to talk to you about that, John, sort of where we can do that. But I'm sure we can make it available through View if that's something that View is happy with. But that's something we need to decide, really.
I'm sure View will be delighted, but let's talk to Sarah, shall we? Because she knows what happens. Oh, and Sarah's just put sounds great in the comments, so that's brilliant. Good. That's it. That's another decision made this afternoon. Okay, I would say that one of the things we're having to think about in Norfolk as well is just things like travelling and settings having slightly different ways of working in terms of accepting visitors as well. So one of the issues we're finding at the moment, for example, is I've been invited to an EHCP review in a primary school tomorrow morning, where we are effectively going to stand in the four corners of the main hall in the school, whereas we have other schools are saying blanket, no visitors at all. Are other people finding that is their experience at the moment?
I think John, at the moment it's a mixed picture. Some schools are saying no, we're happy to do Zoom meetings where possible, to have initial discussions. Other schools are saying yes, you know, you can come in to do the environmental audits. When would be a good time? So we're just planning times around sort of after school, or when it's very quiet, to go in. There is some guidance from government to say that where visitors are coming into the school, there may be some need for PPE, so face masks. So I wouldn't be too surprised if some schools say to you, yes, you're welcome to come in, but you need to wear a face mask. I haven't had that yet. All the schools that are saying yes, they're saying, yeah, that's absolutely fine. But I think we're all tending to use a very sensible approach, thinking about very quiet times to go in to do audits and quiet times to take the students in to do route familiarisations as well. Now, for some habilitation specialists, they will be deferring the route familiarisations until the summer break when the school is very quiet. and that's where we can really focus on just looking at, you know, those small areas and then just building up their route map of the school areas. One of the questions that came up last week at the parents' meeting was also about PE and concerns and worries about PE. And that's a very sort of joint response, really, and joint working between the QTVI and the habilitation specialist, where we're looking at teaching practice as well for PE. I think this is a concern from parents and students as well, that the increasing level of skills that are required for some of the areas of the curriculum are a little bit challenging, I think, for some of our students. So I know here in Dorset we're doing a lot of work around inclusive PE, and we are hoping to publish some information, again, that we would be more than happy to share with other services. And that will be a joint piece of work where we're looking at, my focus is very much on, you know, the gross motor skills and the skills acquisition, and building on the blocks from when, you know, the student was in primary school. And QTVIs, together with the HAB specialists, are looking at how we actually implement the teaching information to teachers so that they can feel confident about teaching inclusive PE. So we're doing a lot of work around that at the moment, working with Sport England and lots of different organisations, including British Blind Sport. So again, you know, we would be happy to share that information.
That's brilliant, thank you. And I think that joint working is the key, isn't it? That's what's coming across
Yes.
all the time, which is that teamwork approach. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions there. I think it's given us quite an insight, certainly from a view perspective, into where local authorities are at the moment. The overwhelming note in my right-hand column is that local authorities are saying no visits at present for visiting staff, peri staff, or whatever terminology you wish to use. Zoom has become clearly very popular, but I guess as time goes by, there will be a loosening of the shackles. There are some specific questions that people have asked around accessible games that are low clutter, no clutter for vision impaired young people, and something around people needing hand-under-hand approaches to tactile learning and things like that. I'm looking around my panel. Katerina, is there anything you'd like to say around hand-under-hand approaches and tactile learning that you've maybe discussed up in the northwest of England?
There will be situations, as I said before, where we can't, which we can't do from 2 meters apart. And if a child needs hand under hand, that's one of those situations. We can do only so much with a child who needs support like that verbally. I think the advice is to do as much as possible verbally, but if not, we have to do take precautions. And I think, what Angela said before about the side to side, so try to avoid face to face or turning your face and your person to the student, but work side to side so your faces don't look to each other. I think I would encourage that in that situation as well, to work. It's very paramount that you do a lot of hand washing in that situation. So if you do have to touch that, you then sort of have very regular hand washing. And it was interesting what you said, Angela, about the masks, because in secondary schools, should we use masks actually or not? Children and adults will touch their faces more, and I have got glasses myself, and it's very annoying wearing a mask because they steam up, and most of our pupils, or a lot of our pupils, wear glasses as well, and it will be very annoying. So I think it has to be actually more hindering, and do we touch ourselves more, and therefore we are more at a risk. I think it is a decision for each child. But I think we will have to be realistic that if child needs that support and we want them in schools and parenting side by side, we need to give that support. I think also on a one-to-one sort of basis, we have to decide, is it better for the child to be in school in that situation, or are there underlying health issues that it is not the right time to come back at that time? If closeness doesn't work, I think that's a decision we have to do case by case, really, and with the parents and with the professionals involved, to weigh up the risks. Really, is the risk higher to come into school and have that close contact, or is the social risk not to be in school higher? And so I feel that's a weighing up, really, with everybody involved, what is the right decision in that situation if such close contact is needed for support.
Thank you, Katerina. When we set up this webinar, and thank you all for your patience and listening skills, hour and 45 minutes or so, I was asked at about 22:45 to start the wind up. So I intend to do that now, because the one thing I did want to do was absolutely finish on time, given that it's 5 o'clock and I'm sure people have other things to do with their evening. One of the things that we talked about was that this recognition that transition is an organic, dynamic process. And Jane quite correctly pointed out when we had the planning meeting the other day that often transition can be very practical at the outset, and then the other implications of that young person moving into a new setting start to be shown up as people settle into ways of working. That's staff, that's teaching staff, support staff, resources, and VI teams that are around that child. And that, as I think has been a theme of this afternoon, that just teamwork and good communication is the key. And my view is that's something that VI services historically always get applauded for. If you read Ofsted area reviews and things like that, it is that often sensory impairment services are very good at communicating with families, with settings, and with children and young people themselves. So I think that's where I would want to leave it. What I'd like to do at this point, in case we do run out of time, is say thank you to the panel. And thank you for those who have contributed down the right-hand side as well. I think there's been a long list of things that have come out that we as practitioners, A, are doing, and B, should continue to do, and C, maybe a few little nuggets of information from people who are maybe in the wider field as parents, as clinical psychologists, etc., will just make us think, oh, I could try that. So again, thank you to the 5 people who've joined me today. The thing I'm going to also take away is very much Emma's point that anxiety isn't necessarily a negative thing. I think that that is really important, that it provides us with an opportunity to adopt adaptive behavior, if that's not too clumsy a sentence. What I'd like to do now is invite members of the panel to give us 1 or 2 or even 3, Katerina, top tips that colleagues can take away tomorrow to their working day. So again, so Katerina, top tips from the northwest of England.
Yeah, one of my top tips I've already said, filling in a transition booklet with the QTVI and parents can be very helpful, and to keep that transition booklet as a working document through the first year. Start gathering information about resources you need now, so the technicians have got enough time to prepare large scale resources or enlarged resources before September. So you've already have got a good start from that perspective. And third one, get as much information from the schools as possible, including floor plan, pictures of classrooms and staff, and go through it with a young person, maybe on a Skype or on a phone call, and talk about what might happen, any worries and any questions they've got.
Perfect. 3 top tips. Can we head south from the northwest coast of England for 1, 2 or 3 top tips, please?
Okay, so communication is absolutely key. As we know, please ensure that the child, your student, is at the heart of everything you do and that their voice is heard. Second tip, if it is important that we follow the COVID guidelines, but we can do it in a fun way. Just make sure the student, you know, knows how to wash their hands properly, that they are taking responsibility. They have a part to play in this, and it's really important that they take their responsibility, you know, seriously, but we can demonstrate it in a fun way as well, just to ease some of that anxiety. And my third tip would be, please read the risk assessment guidance and make sure that, you know, every child has a risk assessment, because that will inform whether or not, as Katharina said, whether or not they will, what their transition will look like, when they will go back to school, and what that will look like for them. And hopefully, after all of this, they will have a smooth transition, and it will be positive, because ultimately that's what we are all trying to achieve.
That's great. Thank you, Angela. Emma, I'm making a huge assumption that as a Great Ormond Street Hospital member of staff, you're somewhere around the southeast of England.
Yes, correct. So from London, my top two tips, really, they're quite general, but I think very, very important. Number one, just remembering that starting secondary school, it's going to be very exciting, but also quite tiring. And just making sure that your young people are getting regular meals, exercise, and very importantly, sleep. You know, making sure they have time to relax in ways that they like to. And number two really is to remember to give, as parents, giving your young people frequent praise during this time of transition for the efforts they're showing, the skills they're developing, you know, recognizing their characteristics such as being considerate, showing a positive attitude to situations, being helpful. You know, starting secondary school might be quite daunting, so parents recognizing how proud they are of their young people will go down very well with them, I'm sure.
That's great, thank you. Jane.
So actually, people have said some of my top tips, but I just want to reiterate that the child's voice and the parent carer's voice should be included in all the decision making. The best thing Chloe did last year to help her prepare was a video, because she had things she really wanted the school to understand before she started there. And okay, it might not have lasted, but it definitely helped the start for her. It gave her confidence when she was starting. And also, so all those decisions make like timetable, group and things, it really helps if parents and children know, so that they can feel confident about it as soon as possible. And the equipment, Chloe got new equipment just before she started on a new brown note as she started school. That combination wasn't good. I'd wished she'd had it longer and she was confident in it, rather than, you know, with everything else, it was almost too much. But we did have a good transition, and with all your support, I'm sure the children you are kind of managing well as well.
That's great, Jane. Thank you. Could I ask Ellen to come in now and just give a brief overview of the work of Look?
Yeah, so just we've mentioned a couple of our services today, so the counselling and the parent support group. So you can find us on our website, and all the information about all our events online are on the website, so that includes the parent support group. We have forums for different age groups throughout the week for young people, so we've got a teenagers one on a Monday, youth on Wednesday, and juniors on Fridays. They're all on the website as well. And as we say, the counselling is free for families, anyone that's over 18, related to a child with a visual impairment. So again, just contact us to be referred for that. Our main service is our peer mentoring service, which all takes place online anyway, so that's really positive that that's just been able to continue throughout lockdown. So for more information about the peer mentoring service, go on our website as well. So yeah, everything you need can be found on our website.
Excellent. And I think it remains for me just to say, just to repeat what I said at the start, VIEW is the vision impairment education workforce. So you don't necessarily have to be a QTVI to be a member, and we would like to encourage colleagues to get involved. There's opportunities for development, as well as the conference training events and online training that is available. It is 16:57. I would thank you all for the very kind comments that have appeared in the right-hand column in the last few minutes. It's been really good webinar. I'm not going to do anything else now other than ask the panel if they have any final words of wisdom.
I don't know whether anybody knows or aware of the Family Fund, but I know the government have got 37 million expected to support more than 75,000 families around the UK. Typically each family is awarded between about £400 and £500, and that's for equipment that's needed at home, so during COVID. So if any of you young people or families need to apply for that, then they can apply directly to the Family Fund, if that's any help.
That's really helpful, thank you. And I think it is being administered across local authorities.
Yes.
As well. I think it's certainly it's on the Norfolk Local Offer website. Katerina?
One thing which hasn't been mentioned, but I think we as QTVIs have to talk to schools about making the other children aware that visually impaired people and blind people can't socially distance and can't often see that distance. So more than ever, other people have to be aware of that. And it's the responsibility of the other children just as much as, or even more than of the blind and visually impaired child, to distance if that when that is needed. Just like when we are outside, somebody with a guide dog, the guide dog can't social distance. I think we as a society have to be more aware, and we have to help schools to make the other children aware of that. Perfect.
Thank you very much. That's a really good point. Jane, one final point from yourself and Chloe.
Just to make sure that the child shares what they want to the school in however they want to do it, because it makes a real difference, I think, for their confidence.
That's excellent. Thank you. And Vanessa, one last try.
Yeah. During my some of the students I've seen in have found it beneficial to talk to other students confidentially about how they feel about using equipment at school, i.e. they don't necessarily want to use their large print, they don't want to use, they're struggling to use a laptop. So I know Look Youth has been fantastic with the mentoring service. I have referred students there, and they found it really beneficial.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Vanessa. Okay, panel, thank you for your time. Delegates, thank you very much for your time and concentration as well. I'd like to call the meeting to a close, and it seems like we're going to do it again. So that'll be good. See you all soon. Best wishes.
Okay.
Bye-bye.